The room was filled with the usual buzz of conversation. A handful of tech moguls, celebrities, and socialites mingled under the dazzling lights of the exclusive event. Elon Musk, the man at the center of it all, stood in a corner, his eyes flicking back and forth as he surveyed the crowd. He was used to the attention. He had built empires, revolutionized industries, and sparked global conversations. But tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't just Elon Musk, the billionaire CEO of Tesla and SpaceX. Tonight, he was a father who fiercely protected his family, especially his 5-year-old son, Xii Musk. Elon had never liked the spotlight when it came to his kids. He had always kept them out of the media's glare, a rare and precious slice of privacy in a world obsessed with the private lives of the rich and famous. But, of course, being Elon Musk meant that nothing was truly private. People had already begun to take an unhealthy interest in his children, especially his youngest, Xii. From the moment his name was announced, the world's media machine had gone into overdrive, dissecting and analyzing every syllable, every letter, every meaning. It was a spectacle he never wanted. Elon had long since accepted that his life would always be in the public eye. But Xii, his little boy, was another story. The press wasn't just interested in him because of who his father was. No, they wanted to know about his name, about his upbringing, about the oddness of the Musk family. And Elon had made it clear, time and time again, that there would be no access to his children, no interviews, no intrusive questions. But tonight, all of that was about to change. The words seemed almost out of place, a social media directive booming in the background of the otherwise prestigious gala. A journalist, a liberal reporter known for his fiery opinions and cutting commentary, had begun filming a segment for his channel. It was clear that his latest target was none other than Elon Musk and his son. The journalist's goal was simple, to provoke Elon into an emotional response, to get the billionaire to crack. The public loved drama, and he was about to deliver a juicy moment. The journalist, who had always seen himself as a champion of the people, was determined to expose what he believed was the truth behind Elon's carefully constructed public image. To him, Musk represented everything that was wrong with the world, the unchecked power, the disregard for the average person, and the oddness of his personal life. The journalist knew that if he could capture an authentic moment of vulnerability, or better yet, anger, from Elon, it would be the story of the year. The chance to ambush Musk, to unravel his calm, calculated persona, was too tempting. As the crowd began to thin out, Elon stood by the balcony, gazing out over the city. Xii was with him, quietly playing with a toy spaceship in his tiny hands, oblivious to the world around him. It was supposed to be a peaceful evening, a rare moment of tranquility amid the chaos that was his life. But the journalist was about to change all of that. From across the room, the journalist locked eyes with Elon. His mind was already working, calculating his approach. He had planned this moment carefully, and now it was time to execute. He made his way toward Elon, his camera crew in tow, all the while flashing a grin that was both confident and self-assured. "Mr. Musk," the journalist called out, his voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. "I have a few questions about your son. If you don't mind." Elon turned slightly, his gaze narrowing ever so slightly. He knew exactly who the journalist was, and he knew that this was no innocent conversation. This was an ambush. The journalist was trying to trap him, to create a scandal, and he wouldn't fall for it. "I'm not here to discuss my family," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. "My children are off limits." The journalist, undeterred, pressed on. "But isn't it curious, Mr. Musk? The name, the eccentricity of it all. Doesn't it seem like you're using your child to further your image, to make headlines? I mean, come on, Xii. What kind of name is that for a child?" There it was. The trap had been set. The journalist was baiting Elon, hoping for a defensive outburst or a moment of weakness. But Elon remained calm. He had dealt with questions like these before, though never quite so pointedly. Xii, innocent and unaware of the conversation happening around him, looked up at the journalist with wide eyes. He didn't understand the complexity of the world, the cruelty that could exist in it. To him, the world was simple, full of wonder. To the journalist, however, Xii was just another pawn in his pursuit of a story. Elon's expression didn't change, though a subtle shift occurred behind his eyes. His protective instincts had been triggered. He wasn't just a CEO standing in front of a reporter, he was a father, and no one was going to disrespect his son, not in front of him. "I think we're done here," Elon said, his voice as calm as ever. "I will not allow you to use my child to further your agenda. If you want to interview me, fine. But stay away from my family." The journalist smirked, but there was a hint of frustration in his eyes. He had expected more of a reaction, perhaps anger or defensiveness. Instead, he was met with composure, an unwavering wall of calm. It was not the response he had anticipated, and for a moment, he faltered. Elon turned to walk away, but the journalist wasn't finished yet. "You can't just control the narrative like this, Musk. People want to know the truth. They deserve it." Elon paused but didn't turn around. "No, you don't get it," he said, his voice still steady. "What people deserve is privacy, especially when it comes to children. You'll never understand that because you're too focused on creating drama for clicks." As he walked away, a mixture of disbelief and admiration filled the journalist's mind. Elon Musk had just shown him a side he had never expected, a side that, in many ways, made him more human than the billionaire persona that had always overshadowed him. But this moment wouldn't end here. No, the journalist's hunger for the story was far from satisfied. As the evening continued, the tension between Elon and the journalist lingered, unnoticed by most of the other guests. But for Elon, the weight of the encounter hung heavy. He had made it clear that his family was off limits, but he knew that the media wouldn't back off so easily. The journalist might have lost this battle, but the war was far from over. "Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from," the journalist's voice echoed, this time more distant, as if he were already preparing for the fallout. This story might just spark a new beginning. And with that, the conflict was only just beginning. "Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning." What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk was no stranger to the limelight. From a young age, he had been driven by an insatiable curiosity about technology, space, and the future. But the world didn't get to know him as the boy who read science fiction novels late into the night or the young man who coded his first video game. They knew him as the billionaire who redefined electric cars, the entrepreneur who launched a private space company, and the innovator behind some of the most ambitious projects in human history. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had always been different. He wasn't content with following the traditional paths laid out before him. As a child, he had an innate ability to absorb information quickly, teaching himself to code by the time he was in his early teens. His parents, Errol and May Musk, both accomplished in their own right, supported his intellectual pursuits. But Elon always felt an intense pressure to succeed, driven by the idea that he could change the world. But the pressure came at a cost. Elon's parents had divorced when he was young, and growing up, he often found himself in the midst of a struggle to understand relationships, family dynamics, and emotional well-being. This fragmented sense of family became a pattern in his life, shaping his views on human connection. He often retreated into his work, using it as an escape from the complexities of life. But as much as he buried himself in business, something was missing. His desire to create was never just about business, it was about solving real problems. Yet, he was still haunted by the emotional distance he often felt from others. It wasn't until he met Justine Wilson, his first wife, that the idea of creating a family of his own began to resonate. Justine was a writer, and they connected over their shared passions for ideas and technology. Together, they had 5 children, all boys, though their firstborn, Nevada, tragically passed away at just 10 weeks old. The loss of Nevada was a blow that haunted Elon deeply, but it also marked the beginning of his understanding of just how precious family was. The pain of losing a child became a constant reminder of how fleeting life could be. After his divorce from Justine, Elon married Tallulah Riley twice, with a few years in between their separations. Yet, despite the ups and downs of his personal life, Elon never wavered in his dedication to his children. His role as a father became a central part of his identity, even if it meant living under the microscope of public scrutiny. Then came Xii Musk. When Elon and the musician Claire Boucher, better known as Grimes, announced the birth of their first child together in 2020, the world was captivated. The name, Xii was like nothing anyone had ever seen before, sparking an avalanche of media coverage and public discussion. The name, as Elon later explained, was a combination of letters and numbers that had deep personal significance to both him and Grimes. But for the rest of the world, it was an enigma, something strange and eccentric, a name that became a symbol of Elon's refusal to conform. Elon, however, had a different perspective. For him, the name was an expression of freedom, a representation of his vision for the future and a reflection of the unconventional life he had built. It wasn't just a name, it was a statement. It was his way of showing the world that his family, just like his career, would never follow the usual rules. Despite the media circus that surrounded the announcement of Xii name, Elon was resolute. He would protect his family, no matter the cost. But with the pressure of being one of the most famous individuals in the world, it wasn't easy. He was often criticized, judged, and misunderstood. For Elon, this became just another challenge he would face head-on, because he knew that the most important thing in his life, more than his businesses, his projects, or his innovations, was his children. Xii, even at 5 years old, had a quiet but profound presence. He was more than just the son of a billionaire, he was a symbol of Elon's vision of the future, a future he hoped would be full of possibility and hope. The bond between father and son was unspoken but deep. While Elon's public life was filled with meetings, launches, and deadlines, his private life was anchored by the unconditional love he had for his children. The quiet moments spent with Xii, watching him play with toy rockets or explaining the wonders of space to a curious little mind, were the moments that grounded him. Those were the moments that reminded him of what really mattered. But, as much as he cherished his time with his family, Elon knew the world would never leave them alone. The press had already started to take an unhealthy interest in Xii, critiquing every part of his life, from his name to his upbringing. The scrutiny, the questions, and the invasive attention were just part of the territory. But for Elon, it didn't feel fair. His son deserved a childhood without the constant glare of the public eye. On the surface, Elon's life seemed like the epitome of success: billionaire tech mogul, father of 5, owner of some of the most cutting-edge companies in the world. But beneath the public persona was a man who had seen firsthand the fragility of life, the pain of losing a child, and the relentless pressure of being constantly under scrutiny. It was something that many people couldn't relate to, something that, in his mind, made him more human than they realized. Despite all the chaos that surrounded him, Elon never wavered in his commitment to his family. His children were his greatest achievement, his legacy, not the companies he built, not the rockets he launched, not the cars that drove themselves. And as Xii grew older, the weight of this commitment grew heavier. As Elon stood by the balcony with Xii at his side, he couldn't help but think about the future. He knew the world would keep trying to pull them into the spotlight, to pry into their lives. But for now, he would do everything in his power to keep his son safe from the prying eyes of the world. After all, a father's love, especially one as protective as Elon's, was a force that no amount of media attention could break. It was a quiet promise, made in the heart of a bustling room filled with people who didn't understand the stakes of the game. But in that moment, as he held Xii close, Elon Musk made a vow. No matter how fierce the battle ahead would be, he would never let anyone take away the peace and privacy that his son deserved. And, as the journalist began to move closer, ready to launch his next attack, Elon could feel the weight of that promise on his shoulders. The war was just beginning. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings, product launches, and business dinners, as Elon Musk continued to balance the intense demands of his empire with his personal life. Yet, despite the usual whirlwind, one thought gnawed at him constantly: the journalist's questions. The encounter at the gala wasn't just another press ambush. It had struck a nerve. The words had been simple, but the implications were far from innocent. "Isn't it curious, Mr. Musk? Doesn't it seem like you're using your child to further your image, to make headlines?" Elon had been asked 100 questions like that over the years. People had criticized him for everything from his company's aggressive work cultures to his Twitter rants. But this was different. This wasn't just a question about his business or his ideas, this was an attack on his role as a father. And, for all his bravado and confidence, there were very few things that could pierce through his armor. His children, especially Xii, were the one thing that Elon Musk would protect at any cost. He had made it clear to the journalist that he wouldn't allow anyone to exploit his family, but Elon knew better than to think that would be the end of it. The media had a way of spinning things, of amplifying the smallest comment into a full-blown controversy. And when it came to someone like Elon Musk, a figure as polarizing and enigmatic as he was, the media were always hungry for more. It wasn't long before the story began to spread. Outlets picked up on the footage from the gala, focusing not on the quiet exchange of words, but on the underlying drama. Headlines blared: Elon Musk's furious response to journalist question about his son, is Musk using his child to make a statement, the strange reality of raising a child as a billionaire. Social media erupted with both support and criticism. Some sided with Elon, understanding his desire to protect his family from the invasive nature of the press. Others accused him of being too secretive, too controlling, too far removed from the realities of the world his son would grow up in. But it was the follow-up interview that truly ignited the flames. Just days after the gala, the journalist, fueled by the momentary victory of the ambush, appeared on his online channel, ready to exploit the situation further. His tone was calculated, carefully crafted to stir controversy. "Folks, we've all seen the footage by now," the journalist began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Elon Musk, the so-called genius, the savior of humanity, gets defensive when we ask about his son. But what's more telling is what he didn't say. He didn't give us a real answer. No explanation for his son's bizarre name. No insight into his so-called parenting style. Just the same old 'I'm too important for this' attitude we've come to expect from billionaires." He leaned forward, a smug look playing across his face. "Now, let's be clear here, we're not just talking about any father. We're talking about Elon Musk, the man who believes he's destined to shape the future of humanity. If that's true, then why does he treat his family like some sort of untouchable, high-profile secret?" Elon had been the subject of criticism many times before, but something about the journalist's words felt personal. This wasn't just a media attack on his businesses or his public persona, it was an attack on his very role as a father. It felt like a violation, an intrusion into a part of his life that he had fought so hard to protect. And it was just getting started. The attacks grew more relentless. Every interview, every press release, every tweet was scrutinized for signs of vulnerability, for any hint of emotional reaction. It wasn't just the usual suspects in the media, even his fellow tech moguls were drawn into the drama. Some took to social media to offer their support for Elon's desire to protect his children from the public eye, while others questioned his motives. Was he overreacting? Was his secrecy hiding something? The story had a life of its own now, and it wasn't going away anytime soon. One morning, as Elon walked into his office at SpaceX, his phone buzzed with an alert. A new video had surfaced. The journalist had somehow managed to get a hold of footage showing Xii with Elon at a private family event. The footage wasn't explicit, there were no interviews, no questions, but it showed enough to fuel the narrative that Elon was not just hiding his son from the media but controlling every aspect of his life. The journalist made it clear that he would stop at nothing to get to the truth, to expose the real Elon Musk behind the headlines. Elon stared at the video for a moment, the weight of it sinking in. He could feel the blood rise in his veins, a mix of anger and frustration. He had seen how the media twisted stories to fit their own agenda, but this was different. This time, they weren't just manipulating his words. They were exploiting his son. He felt a cold determination set in. The next few days were a blur of strategic planning, as Elon and his team worked to contain the fallout. Elon knew that this was more than just a public relations battle. It was a battle for control over his family's privacy and legacy. He had fought countless battles throughout his life, against industry giants, against critics, even against his own limitations. But this felt different. This felt personal. And Elon Musk didn't take kindly to personal attacks. He called a meeting with his PR team, his legal advisors, and a few trusted confidants. He was calm, but the air in the room was thick with intensity. "This has gone too far," Elon said, his voice unwavering. "I won't allow anyone to use my family as a pawn in their game. It's time we fought back." The room went silent as everyone waited for his next words. "We'll be more transparent than ever before. Not about my business, not about my projects, but about my family. We're going to hit them where it hurts, by showing the world just how far they're willing to go to tear a family apart." Elon's eyes burned with resolve as he stood from the table. He wasn't just fighting for his son's privacy anymore. He was fighting for every parent out there who had ever been forced to answer for their choices. For every person who had ever been pushed to the edge by the media's relentless scrutiny. And in that moment, he knew the stakes had never been higher. Elon Musk was no stranger to adversity, but this new challenge was one he hadn't expected. In the world of tech, innovation, and billion-dollar companies, he had faced fierce competition and public backlash many times before. But when it came to his children, especially Xii, Elon was willing to take every measure necessary to protect them. This wasn't a battle for dominance in the marketplace. This was a battle for his family's peace and privacy, a fight he knew would require all his resources and intellect. The first step in his plan to combat the media circus was to assemble an elite team, a mix of legal experts, public relations strategists, and security personnel. They would be his front line, tasked with protecting his family from the prying eyes that had suddenly grown more invasive than ever. But Elon knew that even the best legal teams and PR experts couldn't control the media's insatiable hunger for scandal. He had to do something more drastic. It wasn't long before the media coverage escalated. The same journalist who had started it all began releasing new statements, drawing more attention to Elon's personal life. The journalist's platform gained a tremendous amount of traction, and soon, stories about Xii became front-page news in major outlets. This wasn't just about speculation or intrigue anymore, it was about the journalist's agenda. He was convinced that something hidden was going on behind the walls of the Musk family's private life. Elon refused to back down. He couldn't. His resolve was tested daily by new waves of media pressure, and with every passing hour, the tension mounted. The situation escalated when the journalist managed to get hold of a controversial clip, a candid moment where Elon was in an elevator, briefly touching Xii hand before they parted ways as Elon headed into an important meeting. The moment was innocent, nothing more than a father's gesture of affection, but the journalist's twist was immediate. "The world's most powerful man has a secret," he claimed. And his son, a boy named Xii, could be his greatest asset, and his greatest liability. It was as though every action Elon made was being dissected, analyzed, and manipulated into something far darker than it ever was. As the scrutiny continued to build, Elon felt like a caged animal, ready to lash out. But instead of succumbing to the pressure, he chose to respond with something more calculated. Elon took a step that shocked everyone. He decided to take the fight directly to the media. He called for an unprecedented live-streamed press conference, one that would be broadcast across all major platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and even cable networks. His team had worked tirelessly to prepare the event, ensuring that it was carefully crafted to deliver the message he wanted to send to the world. Elon wasn't just going to defend his family, he was going to change the narrative. As the day of the press conference arrived, the media buzzed with speculation. What would Elon Musk say? What was he planning? The world had never seen a billionaire take such a direct approach to combating the media machine, and the press were eager for his words. The event was scheduled for late afternoon, a time that would ensure maximum viewership. Elon sat in front of a simple, minimalistic backdrop, just him, a few cameras, and the audience watching around the world. He looked calm, but anyone who knew him could see the flicker of intensity in his eyes. The room fell silent as the camera turned on. Elon adjusted his posture and looked directly into the lens. I've built many things in my life, Elon began, his voice steady but carrying a weight of authority. I've made rockets that can land themselves. I've created electric vehicles that have revolutionized the car industry. I've founded companies that are shaping the future. But the one thing I hold most dear is my family. My children. He paused, letting the words sink in. The media likes to ask me about my companies, about my projects, about my work. But what they forget is that none of that matters if I can't protect what's most important to me. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. I've kept my family's lives as private as possible, not because I want to hide anything, but because I want them to have a normal childhood. A childhood free of the invasive, aggressive tactics that have become the norm for those in the public eye. The room seemed to hold its breath. The usual barrage of questions was replaced by an intense silence. And that brings me to the matter at hand, Elon continued, his voice growing firmer. The recent media attention on my son, Xii, is not just an invasion of privacy. It is a dangerous precedent. It's not about curiosity or concern for his well-being. It's about exploiting a child, using him as a tool for clicks and views. That's something I will not stand for. Elon paused again, his eyes scanning the room. He knew the significance of his words, and he understood that this moment would be pivotal in shaping how the public viewed the ongoing battle. But there was something else, a quiet fire burning inside him. This was no longer just about the media. This was about making a statement to everyone watching. I have every right to protect my family, he said. And I will do so, no matter the cost. Whether it's the press or anyone else, I will not allow anyone to use my child's name for profit. Not now. Not ever. The gravity of Elon's words hit the audience like a wave. There was no turning back now. This was his declaration of war against the press, his refusal to allow his family to be dragged into the spotlight for the world to consume. Elon ended the press conference with one final statement. My son and I are not a spectacle. I will not allow anyone to treat my family as anything less than that, my family. And I will fight to protect them, no matter what. As the stream ended, the reaction from the public was swift. Some hailed Elon as a hero, a father willing to stand up against the intrusive forces of the media. Others, of course, condemned him for his bluntness and secrecy, accusing him of trying to control the narrative for personal gain. But one thing was clear, the fight was far from over. The media wasn't about to let up. But neither was Elon Musk. And as the days passed, Elon began to feel the weight of his decision. He had taken a step into the unknown, and the outcome was uncertain. He couldn't predict what would happen next, but one thing was for sure, he was no longer just fighting for his family's privacy. He was fighting for the future of how the media treated the lives of those who didn't choose to be in the spotlight. The war had just begun. The aftermath of Elon's live-streamed press conference reverberated across the globe. Social media, news channels, and digital platforms exploded with opinions, discussions, and reactions. Some hailed Elon as a protector, a father willing to stand firm in the face of a relentless and invasive media. Others, however, criticized him for being too controlling, too distant, even too secretive. In the days following, the pressure mounted on both sides. The media were relentless, feeding on the story of a father's defense of his son as though it were a moral battle between two opposing forces. Yet, as much as Elon had hoped his message would bring peace, it only fueled the fire. The media pushed harder, searching for new angles, new questions. But there was something darker brewing, something that would shake Elon's resolve to the core. It started with a rumor, a whisper in the media circles. A source, anonymous but allegedly close to Elon's family, had suggested that there were cracks in the Musk family's foundation. They claimed that the pressure of living in the public eye was causing tension, even dysfunction, within Elon's personal life. The tabloid headlines came fast and furious: Elon Musk's family struggling under the pressure, Musk's divorce imminent as family faces backlash, are the Musk children in danger? Though these were only rumors, they had a strange power. They tapped into the collective imagination of the public. No one knew what was true, but they believed what they saw. The specter of disintegration haunted the Musk name. Elon's team worked tirelessly to refute the stories, issuing statements and attempting to shut down the speculation. But the damage had been done. The media had planted the seed of doubt. It didn't matter that the rumors were unverified, once the narrative was out there, it had already taken root. And with each new story, Elon felt a new wave of frustration and helplessness rising within him. But nothing prepared him for the moment when the journalist, the one who had started it all, released an exposé that shook him to his very core. The article included a shocking new revelation, an intimate interview with a former close friend of Elon's, who claimed to have seen Elon behave in a way that was anything but the poised, calculating tech mogul the public knew him to be. The friend described a version of Elon who was overwhelmed, disconnected, and struggling to cope with the pressures of being both a global figure and a father. "Is this the real Elon Musk?" the article asked. "Behind the bravado and the tech empire, is he simply a man who cannot handle the weight of his own choices? A man who is losing control of everything, including his own family?" The words hit Elon harder than he could have imagined. Not because they were true, he knew the reporter had no real insight into his life, but because they rang with just enough familiarity to strike a nerve. The idea that his personal life was slipping out of his grasp, that he was not in control, cut deeper than he could express. It was a feeling that plagued him since his early days in Silicon Valley, when his drive to push the limits of innovation had sometimes led him to neglect the people closest to him. It was something he had always feared, that his pursuit of greatness would cost him his humanity, and in turn, his family. He tried to shake it off. He buried himself in work, in his companies, in the drive to make the world a better place. But the rumors persisted, following him like a shadow. Each tweet, each article, each interview became another brick in the wall that was slowly closing in on him. One evening, while sitting in his office at Tesla, Elon found himself alone with his thoughts, staring at the soft glow of the desk lamp. His phone buzzed with another notification, another headline, another story. But this time, it wasn't just another critical opinion. It was a picture. The image was of Xii, caught in the background of a paparazzi shot taken during a family outing. Elon had never wanted his son to be part of the public spectacle, yet here was a photograph of his child, vulnerable, innocent, caught by the lens of someone who cared only for the exposure. The image seemed to mock him. His son's face was half visible, but the photo alone spoke volumes. It felt as though the world was watching every moment of his life through a magnifying glass, ready to twist and distort every simple gesture. Elon's heart sank. The feeling of helplessness was suffocating. This wasn't just about the press anymore. This was about his inability to protect what mattered most to him. The weight of fatherhood, the profound responsibility that came with it, was heavier than any business deal, any rocket launch, any product development. In that moment, he felt a wave of raw emotion he had never fully acknowledged before. His children weren't just the product of his ambition, they were his legacy, the part of him that would outlast every company, every tweet, every headline. They were the ones he wanted to see grow, without the intrusion of the world's eyes. He realized, with piercing clarity, that he had been so focused on building a future for humanity that he had overlooked the fragility of his own humanity in the process. The tears came before he could stop them. He wasn't just a billionaire tech mogul. He was a father, struggling to do what was right for his family. And as Elon wiped his eyes, something shifted within him. The anger, the frustration, it had all built up to this moment. He knew that he couldn't fight this battle with anger alone. He needed to think clearly, to act decisively, to show the world that he was capable of both protecting his family and leading his companies. But he also knew that it would take more than just fighting back against the press, it would take a re-evaluation of his own values. He wasn't just fighting for his son's privacy anymore. He was fighting for his own peace, for the preservation of his family's future. And in the quiet of his office, Elon Musk made a decision. He would no longer be reactive. He would take control of his story, on his own terms. It was time to turn the tables. The emotional intensity of this realization marked the true turning point. Elon was no longer just a man who built rockets. He was a father on a mission to rebuild his family's privacy, to stand up for his children, and to redefine what it meant to live a life in the public eye. This battle, he knew, was far from over. As the days passed, Elon Musk's resolve solidified. He knew the battle was far from over, but he had come to a powerful realization: the war wasn't just about protecting his family's privacy, it was about setting a precedent for how the public and the media should treat individuals, especially those who never asked for the spotlight. His fight had evolved. It was no longer about defending his son against a relentless press, it was about taking a stand for the kind of world he wanted to help create, a world where privacy, dignity, and humanity were valued above clicks and headlines. Elon's first step was to retreat from the public eye, but this time, not in defeat. He withdrew from social media, cancelled unnecessary interviews, and redirected his attention back to the work that had once been his sole focus. He needed to regain control, not just of the media narrative, but of his own life. The distractions had grown too much, and he understood that his influence over his own story had become too diluted. Behind closed doors, he worked closely with his team to devise a new, proactive strategy. The plan would involve transparency, but not on the media's terms. It would be his terms, a measured and calculated response to the media's attempts to shape his life. The team drafted a series of initiatives to counteract the rumors, not with confrontation or aggressive tactics, but with honesty and control. First, Elon would hold a second live-streamed event, but this time, he would speak directly to the people who mattered most, his fans, his supporters, the people who believed in his vision for the future. This was about turning the tables, not just defending his privacy, but reshaping the narrative and reclaiming control over the conversation. He was calm and focused in the days leading up to the event. His team had made sure that every detail was thought out. This time, it wasn't just a press conference, it was an opportunity for Elon to communicate his principles, to explain not just his decision to protect his family, but why it was so important to him, to the world, and to the future. The day of the event, Elon appeared on screen, once again with that simple backdrop, the same clean, almost minimalist environment that had become a symbol of his no-nonsense approach. There were no flashy graphics, no distracting elements. Just Elon, the camera, and the message. "Thank you for joining me," Elon began, his voice steady but calm. "I've been thinking a lot about the events of the past few weeks, about everything that's happened, and how it's affected not just me, but those closest to me. My family, my friends, my children. I've learned a lot during this time. The media, social platforms, the public, it all becomes noise when the most important things are being lost in the process. He paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his words to settle. The story that's been told about me, about my family, has never been the full story, Elon continued. What I do in the public eye, the decisions I make in the world of business and technology, that's just one side of who I am. But the truth is, there's so much more. I'm a father, a brother, a son. I'm someone who values privacy, and who believes that family should come first. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on the camera. I want to take a moment to address something that's been on my mind. I've spent so many years working to change the world, to create a future that I hope will benefit everyone. But at the same time, I've realized that I've neglected one crucial part of that future, the one I'm building with my children. My son, Xii, is not a pawn in anyone's game. He's a child, my child, and he deserves the right to grow up free from the pressures and distortions of the public eye. The words hung in the air. The audience, whether they were watching live or later in replays, could feel the sincerity in Elon's voice. This wasn't just about defending his family, it was about laying the groundwork for a new kind of conversation. One that respected boundaries, values, and personal lives. I've always believed in the power of progress, in pushing the boundaries of what's possible, Elon continued. But now I see that progress isn't just about technology, it's about our ability to protect the things that matter most. Our families. Our privacy. Our humanity. These are the things we need to protect, too, as we move forward in this fast-paced, digital world. If we don't, we risk losing what makes us human. He then shifted gears, looking directly into the camera, his eyes burning with intensity. The media's obsession with my family, my personal life, it's not just an invasion of privacy. It's a sign of something much bigger. We're at a crossroads in how we view celebrities, tech moguls, and the public figures who shape our world. But just because someone is in the public eye doesn't mean they should be subjected to the whims of a machine that thrives on chaos, sensationalism, and exploitation. Elon took a deep breath, his expression softening. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not asking for anyone to take my side. What I'm asking for is understanding. For respect. For the recognition that there's more to the story than what you see on the surface. And for people to understand that the real fight isn't between me and the media, it's between all of us and the forces that try to define us, our lives, and our worth, based on an image, not the truth. Elon stood up and walked slowly toward the camera. His voice dropped, becoming more personal, more intimate. This is the last time I'm addressing this. From here on out, I will continue to do what I do best, build, innovate, and shape the future. But I'll do it on my terms. I'll do it with my family, with their privacy intact. And I'll do it knowing that the future we're building isn't just about rockets and electric cars, it's about the world we leave behind for our children. He gave a final, resolute nod. Thank you for listening. I hope you understand. With that, the live stream ended. The world was silent for a moment, and then the reactions poured in. There was still a mix of praise and criticism, but something had shifted. Elon had taken control, not just of his story, but of the future he wanted to build. It was a turning point, a victory in a battle that had taken a personal toll. For the first time in weeks, Elon felt a sense of peace. He had said his piece. And now, he would return to what mattered most, his family, his work, and the legacy he would leave behind, not just as a tech mogul, but as a man who fought for what he believed in. As Elon Musk's live-streamed message reverberated through the media landscape, there was an unexpected shift in the atmosphere. For days, the world buzzed with mixed reactions, some critical, some supportive, but there was one reaction that Elon hadn't anticipated, the change within his own family. His message, broadcast to millions, had also reached the people closest to him in ways he never thought it would. Kimball, his brother, was one of the first to reach out. Though Kimball had always supported Elon in his ventures, their relationship had been strained in recent years. The constant pressure of their high-profile lives and the differing priorities that came with such unique responsibilities had kept them apart. But now, as Elon sat quietly at his desk in the Tesla headquarters, staring at his phone, Kimball's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, bro, watched your stream," Kimball's message began. "I get why you did it. We all know how the media spins things. But I think it's time we talk about the future, the family, and what really matters. Let's catch up soon." Elon stared at the message for a long moment, the weight of Kimball's words sinking in. The message wasn't just supportive, it was an invitation to reconnect, to repair the bond they once had, and to discuss the deeper questions that had been pushed aside for too long. It was clear to Elon that the weight of his decision had rippled far beyond the walls of his companies. His family was feeling it, too. It was the spark of something new, an opportunity to revisit the connections that mattered most. But there was one person Elon hadn't heard from yet, Grimes. Grimes, the mother of his child Xii, had remained silent through the entire media storm. While they had once shared a public connection through their unique relationship, Grimes had always maintained a level of privacy, even when their son became a symbol of their unconventional bond. Their relationship, though still intact, had always been complex, more complicated than most people realized. The media's fixation on their son had only made matters more difficult. Elon had been bracing for a response from Grimes, but it hadn't come. Days passed, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unsaid, something that needed to be addressed, not just for his son's sake, but for the sake of their co-parenting relationship. That night, after his children had gone to bed, Elon finally decided to reach out. He knew the conversation was going to be delicate, but it was time to face the unspoken tension that had been building up over the years. He picked up his phone and sent her a simple message: "We need to talk, Grimes. About everything. Call me when you can." The minutes that followed felt like hours. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Finally, the phone rang. It was Grimes. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but cautious. "Elon," she continued, "I've been thinking a lot about all of this, about what's happening in the media, what's been happening with our son. You know, it's hard to watch when the world thinks they know what's best for him, but I get why you did what you did. I think it's brave." There was a pause, and then Grimes added, "But it's also terrifying. The way things are moving, how we're pulled in different directions, how everything we do is scrutinized. I just want what's best for X, too." Elon felt the tension easing, but there was still a rawness in her voice. The reality of the situation, the reality of the weight they both carried, was undeniable. "I get it," Elon said quietly. "It's been overwhelming, and I've been so focused on everything else that I haven't really thought about how it's affecting us." "How it's affecting you?" There was another long silence on the line. Grimes' voice cracked as she spoke again. "I didn't ask for any of this," she admitted. "The media. The constant attention. It's hard to even go outside without feeling like I'm being watched. And I can't help but wonder, where do we go from here? How do we make sure X grows up without all of this chaos?" Elon knew that this conversation was not just about defending his son, it was about finding a path forward, one that worked for both of them, a way to share responsibility without compromising their values or their privacy. He realized that they were both in this together, even if their lives had pulled them in different directions. "I don't have all the answers," Elon confessed. "But I know one thing for sure: I want to do better. I want to make sure X is safe, happy, and free to be a kid. I know we've both been under a lot of pressure, but I think we need to be united on this. For him." Grimes sighed deeply, her voice softening. "I agree. We can't let the world tell us how to raise our son. He deserves more than that." It wasn't a perfect resolution. But it was a start. In that moment, Elon realized that he couldn't do this alone. Family wasn't just about being strong, it was about vulnerability, compromise, and understanding. It wasn't just about the big wins in business or technology. It was about the quiet moments of connection, where understanding and trust took precedence over everything else. By the end of the conversation, both Elon and Grimes had reached a new understanding. They weren't just parents of a child in the public eye, they were partners in raising him, and they needed to support each other, even when the world tried to tear them apart. As Elon hung up the phone, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't the easy fix he had hoped for, but it was real. And that, for now, was enough. But there was still one piece of the puzzle left to resolve: his relationship with the media. He couldn't afford to let this moment slip away. Elon knew that the world was watching, waiting for his next move. And it was time for him to set the stage for what came next. He had taken the first step toward reclaiming his privacy. Now, he needed to build on that foundation and ensure that the future he was crafting was one built on respect, not exploitation. The journey ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain: Elon Musk wasn't going to let the world define his life any longer. Despite the sincerity of Elon's message, the media's response was swift, varied, and in many ways, predictable. The controversy that had swirled around his son, Xii, and the ensuing drama seemed to have only fueled the fire. The media, ever eager to latch onto any narrative that could generate clicks, began its own counterattack. Elon's live-streamed plea for privacy had given them a fresh angle, a twist that played into their love for sensationalism. While many fans and followers praised his speech, the headlines in major media outlets were a different story. Some reported on his speech with a degree of respect, acknowledging that his words might have a valid point. Others, however, seized upon the drama, speculating on hidden tensions, throwing in unnecessary details about his private life, and scrutinizing his every word for any sign of weakness. Is Elon Musk's plea for privacy just a strategic move? One headline read, questioning the sincerity of his public stance. Another piece, by a journalist who had tried to ambush him earlier, was more cynical: Elon Musk's live-stream deflection, what is he really hiding? The media was not about to let go of a narrative it had worked hard to build. Even Elon's noble intentions to defend his son's privacy seemed to have a twist: the media would spin it into something more salacious, more appealing to their audiences. In a sense, they had learned nothing. They still viewed Musk, his family, and even his son, as commodities to be used for profit. But this time, things felt different. Elon wasn't backing down. He had already shown his hand, and it wasn't one of denial or anger. He wasn't going to engage in a war of words with the media, because he knew that's exactly what they wanted. Instead, he chose a different route, one that would force the media to reconsider its strategy. Elon had made a decision: silence. He would not answer the questions they expected him to. He would not fall into their trap of producing more sensational headlines. It was time for him to take back control in a way they wouldn't anticipate. And he would do it by letting the world watch as he continued to change the course of technological history. The first sign of Elon's new strategy came during a high-stakes Tesla board meeting. While the board was discussing projections for the upcoming quarter, Elon appeared less interested in the details of numbers than he had been in the past. Instead, he spoke of the future of technology and society in an almost philosophical manner, shifting the conversation toward the broader implications of Tesla's work. "We're not just building cars," he said, his voice steady. "We're building a future where privacy matters. We're building a future where people's lives, whether they're in the public eye or not, are treated with respect. The same goes for how we think about our personal data, how we design our products, and how we protect our families." At first, the board members were unsure of how to respond. Tesla was a business, an incredibly profitable one, at that, and there were more pressing matters to discuss. But Elon's words hit with a quiet resonance. The world was watching, and for once, he wasn't just speaking about numbers and profits. He was speaking about something deeper, something that transcended technology. "We are at a crossroads," he continued. "The way we operate as a society is changing. Everything we do, from how we work to how we live and raise our families, is being shaped by technology. We have the power to steer that change in a direction that doesn't compromise our values. And that means protecting our privacy. His words were simple, but they cut to the heart of a much larger issue. The future of humanity was, in many ways, shaped by companies like Tesla and SpaceX. But what good was advancing technology if the very essence of people's lives was being undermined by the relentless march of the media and corporate surveillance? After the meeting, Elon reached out to his communications team. It was time for action. He wanted Tesla to take a stand, not just as a car company, but as a company that stood for something greater. He wanted to make it clear to the public and the media that his values extended beyond the business world. He instructed his team to begin drafting a new initiative, an initiative that would combine Tesla's commitment to renewable energy with a bold new stance on data protection and privacy. He wanted to champion a movement where families, individuals, and communities could feel safe from exploitation. Tesla, he believed, could lead the way. The campaign's tagline was simple: privacy, people, progress. While Elon's focus shifted toward ensuring that Tesla played a more significant role in advocating for privacy, he knew that the media's thirst for drama wouldn't subside so easily. And as he predicted, the media's relentless pursuit of his personal life continued to intensify. Yet this time, Elon wasn't alone in his fight. Support poured in from unexpected places. Some of his more prominent peers in Silicon Valley reached out to express their solidarity, including Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. While their companies had historically operated in very different ways, the underlying truth was that they, too, had been targets of media invasion. The message was clear: it was time for tech companies to not just innovate but to protect the very people they served. Privacy had become a commodity that everyone seemed willing to exploit, and Elon's message was resonating far beyond just the tech industry. Even some media outlets, especially those that had once been critical, began to shift their tone. Editorials and opinion pieces started to emerge, acknowledging that Elon's actions had sparked a conversation about the role of privacy in a digital age. The conversation was gaining momentum. But even as support grew, the real test was yet to come. Elon knew that this was only the beginning. He had planted a seed, but it would take time to grow. The question that remained was whether the world was ready to change, or whether it was too deeply entrenched in its own patterns to listen. Elon Musk, for once, didn't have all the answers. But as he sat back in his office late one evening, looking out over the Tesla factory below, he knew that he had done something important. He had stood up not just for his family, but for the values that would define the future. The world had heard him. Now, it was time to see if it would act. As days turned into weeks, Elon Musk's move to reclaim his privacy, and by extension, the privacy of his family, continued to make waves across the globe. The media, ever hungry for new angles, quickly discovered something: the ripple effect was real. What started as a personal mission to shield his son from the suffocating glare of the public eye had snowballed into something much larger. Tesla, SpaceX, and even his personal brand had been transformed by the controversy. As Elon pushed forward with his new stance on privacy, he found himself at the center of a movement. It wasn't just about protecting his family anymore. It had become a crusade against the ever-encroaching forces of digital surveillance and media sensationalism. But it wasn't just the media that took notice. Activists, tech influencers, and privacy advocates all started rallying around Elon's call to action. There was a growing sense that the world was being taken over by algorithms, surveillance technologies, and intrusive platforms that stripped people of their privacy at every turn. For the first time in years, there was a sense of unity in the tech industry, a collective acknowledgement that the fight for privacy needed to go beyond just individual efforts. It was a global issue, one that impacted not just the rich and famous, but ordinary people who had no control over their data. In Silicon Valley, several tech leaders began to take public stances similar to Elon's. Many of them, long accustomed to protecting their intellectual property and personal lives, had been silent on the issue of privacy until now. Now, with Elon leading the charge, it seemed that the conversation was finally shifting towards something more important than quarterly profits and stock market performance. It was about ethics. It was about people. But this new, unified movement didn't come without its own challenges. Elon found himself facing resistance from unexpected quarters. For every ally that supported his newfound crusade, there were those who saw it as a direct threat to the status quo. Among the loudest critics were the media conglomerates that had long profited from invasive reporting and sensationalism. Their business model was built on exploiting the privacy of public figures, and they weren't about to let Elon Musk, or anyone else, stop them. The corporate giants that controlled the news media launched a series of counterattacks, determined to recapture the narrative. As one particular media outlet, News Corp, came out with a blistering editorial, Elon could feel the weight of their words pressing against him. The tech billionaire's hypocrisy, Elon Musk's privacy revolution, or just a stunt, the headline screamed. The editorial accused Musk of being selective in his outrage, pointing out that his companies were often complicit in contributing to the very tech-driven surveillance culture he claimed to oppose. The very tools Musk helped create, from social media algorithms to data-driven marketing, are the same ones that infringe on privacy every day. He may talk the talk now, but has he ever truly walked the walk? It was a pointed attack, one designed to undermine his credibility. And yet, Elon wasn't rattled. In fact, he expected it. The media had been part of the problem for so long that they would never welcome the idea of losing their power. But Musk was playing a different game now. The articles and editorials were only feeding his resolve. If anything, they strengthened his belief in the cause he had taken up. The privacy movement wasn't just about getting people to respect the boundaries of his family, it was about demanding that society as a whole reevaluate how it operated in the digital age. In response to the criticism, Elon decided to take matters into his own hands. He arranged for an exclusive interview with a highly respected journalist, someone who had a reputation for asking tough questions but also for being fair. The goal wasn't just to defend his position, it was to make his argument for privacy in a way that transcended the personal and moved into the universal. The interview was held in one of the quieter rooms at Tesla's headquarters, away from the flashing cameras and prying eyes. Elon, dressed casually in a black hoodie and jeans, sat across from the journalist, his demeanor calm and collected. "So, Elon, you've been very vocal lately about the importance of privacy. But some are asking, why now?" the journalist asked. "Is this really about protecting your family, or is this a strategic move? After all, you've been in the spotlight for years." Elon smiled slightly, leaning back in his chair. "It's not about timing. It's about realizing that the world has changed. We've reached a point where privacy is no longer a given. The very technology that promises to help us has also made it easier to invade our most personal moments. I used to be part of that system, and I've realized that I can't just sit back and let it continue." The journalist raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "But many of the same tools you criticize were products of your own companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and even some of your earlier ventures. Doesn't that make this stance seem a bit hypocritical?" Elon didn't flinch. "I get the criticism. I built things that changed the world, but I've also learned that progress should never come at the cost of individual autonomy. Privacy is a fundamental right. I'm not just fighting for my family, I'm fighting for everyone." He continued, his voice growing more passionate. "We live in a world where people have more access to data than ever before. But that data comes at a price. Every click, every search, every interaction, it's all being watched, cataloged, and sold. People's lives are being monetized without their consent. That's a problem. And it's not just about the rich and famous, it's about everyday people who don't have the resources to protect themselves." The journalist nodded thoughtfully, but Elon could tell that the question was coming. It always came. Some would argue that these systems of surveillance and data collection are necessary for progress, the journalist pressed. For innovation, for targeting ads, for improving the user experience. So, what do you propose as a solution? Elon leaned forward, his gaze steady. We need new rules. We need systems that prioritize people over profits. We need technologies that protect privacy by default. And we need a culture that respects the autonomy of individuals. The way forward isn't about making a quick buck off of people's lives, it's about making technology work for people, not against them. The interview continued for another hour, but it was clear that the journalist, despite his probing questions, was beginning to see Elon's point of view. There was something powerful about Elon's message, not just as a tech mogul, but as someone who had realized the cost of unchecked innovation. By the end of the interview, the journalist had a new perspective on Musk. And though the interview wouldn't stop the media onslaught, it was a subtle victory in itself. The narrative was shifting, slowly, but surely. As Elon left the building, he couldn't help but feel that, in this battle, he was not just fighting for his family's privacy. He was fighting for a future where everyone's privacy mattered, where technology would be used to enhance lives, not exploit them. It was a long road ahead, but one thing was certain, Elon Musk was ready for whatever came next. As the days passed, the noise surrounding Elon Musk's privacy movement continued to grow. The media's attacks became louder, more pointed, and more relentless. They refused to let go of the story, feeding off every misstep and piece of information they could dig up. The personal details of Elon's life, his family, and his every public move were dissected with surgical precision, hoping for the next scandal to erupt. But what the media didn't count on was that Elon Musk wasn't the type to crumble under pressure. His focus remained unshaken. His intentions had become clearer than ever. He wasn't just fighting for the privacy of his son, Xii, or even for the Musk family. He was building a foundation, a platform, for a larger movement, one that could redefine privacy in the digital age. While the media spun their tales, there were other voices rising in support of Elon. A wave of public backing had begun to take form, fueled by everyday people who found themselves increasingly concerned with the way their personal lives were being exposed without their consent. The idea of data privacy was no longer a niche issue discussed only in tech circles, it had entered the mainstream. Yet, despite the growing momentum behind him, Elon faced what could be considered a critical crossroads. There were moments when it felt like the battle had only just begun, and the fight ahead would only get harder. Elon spent his evenings in his office, poring over reports from Tesla's latest developments, while simultaneously taking strategic calls with his team and legal advisors. But on this particular evening, something felt different. He stared at the screen, his mind not on business but on the larger implications of the mission he had taken on. What started as a personal defense of his family's privacy had turned into a defining battle of the digital age, a clash of ideals that stretched far beyond his immediate circle. His eyes drifted to the framed photo on his desk of his children. Xii, his youngest, was the one who had sparked this whole journey. The photo was taken at a family outing at SpaceX's launch site. It was a rare, peaceful moment, one of the few times when Elon's personal life felt untouched by the eyes of the world. He thought about how far he had come since then. Elon's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unexpected source, Jeff Bezos. "Hey, Elon," Jeff's voice rang out over the line. "I saw the latest article. You've got them on the ropes, but it's clear they won't let up. I know you're used to the pressure, but this might get uglier." Elon leaned back in his chair. "I know. It's already ugly. But it's worth it. It's time we set a new precedent in the tech industry. People have a right to their privacy. I won't let the media, or anyone else, dictate the rules anymore." Bezos, always the pragmatist, paused for a moment before responding. "Just be careful, Elon. The media may have underestimated you, but they're not going to go down without a fight. They'll double down, start digging up every piece of dirt they can. They'll push every button. You're not just fighting for privacy anymore. You're fighting against a whole system. Elon smiled, though the tone was darker than usual. I'm ready. We all need to be. The world's been playing by the wrong rules for too long. It's time to change the game. Bezos agreed, but before the conversation ended, he offered one last piece of advice. Watch your back. Trust is everything now. Keep your circle tight. The call ended, and Elon sat in silence for a moment. The weight of the conversation lingered. He had built incredible companies, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, but this battle wasn't about rockets or electric cars. This was something far more personal. This was about safeguarding the autonomy of every individual, of teaching the world that privacy was not a privilege reserved for the rich and famous, but a fundamental right for all. Despite the rising support from some quarters, Elon also began to feel the strain. The media onslaught didn't slow down, and new angles were always being found to challenge his resolve. As much as the movement gained ground, there were those who stood in opposition, questioning whether he had the moral high ground at all. It was an early morning when the latest attack came. The article hit the front page, boldly titled, Elon Musk, the hypocrisy of the privacy crusader. This time, the media had dug deep, using some of Elon's past business dealings to accuse him of benefiting from data exploitation in other ventures. They painted a picture of someone who had once eagerly embraced the very system he was now fighting against. The headline was explosive, and the article itself was far more damaging than anything that had come before. It painted Elon as a hypocrite, a man who only now, when it suited his narrative, was preaching the virtues of privacy. The article included quotes from former colleagues, rivals, and industry experts who questioned whether Elon's motivations were truly about protecting privacy or whether he was simply trying to create a new narrative for himself. Despite the sting of the criticism, Elon remained calm. He was used to attacks of this nature, and this one, though it hurt, wouldn't deter him from his mission. He knew this moment would come. In fact, he expected it. That afternoon, as Elon prepared for a critical speech about the future of Tesla's self-driving cars and the role of artificial intelligence in data protection, the pressure mounted. He was aware that this speech wasn't just about Tesla, it was about his personal convictions, about the fight for privacy, about the way the world was evolving. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd hushed. The lights were bright, but the faces in the audience, investors, engineers, tech enthusiasts, were all focused on him, waiting for his words. Elon took a deep breath and began speaking, his voice steady. I've spent my life building companies, creating technologies, and revolutionizing industries. But today, I stand before you not as a businessman, not as a tech mogul, but as a father, someone who wants a future for his children, and for all children, where their right to privacy is protected. He continued, the weight of his words resonating in the air. Privacy is not a luxury. It's a right. And that right should not be dictated by those who stand to profit from it. We must redefine the way technology interacts with human lives. It's time we move away from a world where personal data is seen as a commodity. The speech continued, but what mattered most was the emotion behind his words. For the first time, Elon's message wasn't about Tesla's stock price or the latest technological advancements. It was about a larger vision, a vision of a world where privacy wasn't a battleground, but a shared value. By the time he finished, the room was silent, and the applause that followed was slow but steady, thoughtful. It wasn't just about agreeing with Elon, it was about understanding the deeper meaning behind his message. As he left the stage, Elon felt a sense of resolve. The battle was far from over, but this moment, this speech, had made a difference. The storm before the calm had passed, and now, the true work was beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days following Elon's public speech were a blur. The media, of course, had its own take on the events. Some hailed him as a visionary, a crusader fighting for the rights of individuals in a world where privacy was quickly becoming obsolete. Others were less kind. The backlash was fierce, but for Elon, this was nothing new. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages, and while some were from well-wishers and supporters, many were from critics trying to tear down everything he had said. The editorial boards of major publications had already written scathing responses, accusing him of hypocrisy, capitalizing on controversy, and, perhaps the most biting accusation, trying to distract the public from his company's own involvement in mass data collection. Elon sat in his office late one evening, scrolling through article after article. The anger in the written words was palpable. There were those who painted him as an opportunist, someone who had only now realized the dangers of the surveillance state because it had touched his own family. Others didn't even bother with subtlety, they called him a fraud, a manipulator of public opinion for personal gain. One article caught his eye in particular, one written by a well-known journalist with a history of attacking high-profile figures. The headline read, "Elon Musk, the privacy crusader who built an empire on data." Reading the words, Elon felt a mix of frustration and determination. The journalist's narrative twisted his message and focused on his company's history rather than the core issue, the growing dangers of unchecked surveillance. The story called out the irony of Elon's advocacy, pointing to the data-driven systems in his companies like Tesla's autopilot and SpaceX's satellite network. Though the media's attempts to discredit him were expected, this particular attack hit a little closer to home. It wasn't just about defending his own privacy anymore. It was about how the world viewed the very idea of privacy, and whether people would rally behind his cause. The next morning, Elon called an emergency meeting with his senior advisors and closest allies. He needed to strategize. The media storm wasn't just annoying, it was potentially damaging to the message he had worked so hard to promote. "We need a clear, concise response," Elon said, pacing in his office. "We can't keep playing defense. The more we react, the more they win. It's time to get ahead of this." He turned to his lead communications director, Kelly. "What's the plan?" Kelly, a seasoned professional who had weathered many storms with Elon over the years, nodded. "We have to show the world that your vision for privacy isn't a contradiction, Elon. We have to show that you've learned from your past decisions. We need transparency, more than ever." Elon stopped pacing and turned toward the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, looking out over the sprawling Tesla factory. His mind churned. Kelly was right. If he wanted people to believe in his cause, he needed to lead by example. That meant acknowledging the complexity of his past, but also reinforcing his commitment to change. "We'll make a series of announcements," Elon said, his voice thoughtful. "We'll release new privacy policies for Tesla and SpaceX, demonstrating that we're not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. We need to be transparent about the data we collect and how we use it. We'll open the books." Kelly nodded again. "And we should tie this directly to the larger movement, the fight for privacy in the digital age. People need to understand that this is bigger than you, bigger than your companies. It's about the future of data privacy for everyone." Elon took a deep breath. "And I want to personally address the media. Not in some formal press release, but directly, with them in the room. I'll do it on my terms, not theirs. We need to be clear that this isn't about creating a narrative for Elon Musk, it's about creating a new reality for all of us." The decision was made. Elon would step up his campaign for privacy, not just for his son, not just for his family, but for every person whose data had been commodified without their consent. In the following days, Tesla and SpaceX released a series of bold statements, laying out new privacy policies that were some of the strictest in the tech industry. Tesla would no longer collect data from its cars without explicit consent from the driver. SpaceX, too, would limit the amount of personal data it collected through its satellite systems, ensuring greater transparency and user control. But the most impactful moment came when Elon invited a select group of journalists for a live, unscripted interview. It wasn't a typical press conference, it was more of a conversation, a challenge, really. He wanted the world to hear directly from him, to see the person behind the headlines. The event took place in a spacious, minimalistic conference room at Tesla's headquarters. A long, polished table sat in the middle, surrounded by reporters and media outlets from across the globe. Elon walked into the room, wearing his usual black hoodie and jeans, his demeanor calm but resolute. The room fell silent as he took his seat, his eyes scanning the faces before him. Then, with a directness that made every reporter lean in, he began. "There's a lot of noise out there," he started. "A lot of accusations and a lot of people telling you what I stand for. But I'm here to tell you what I stand for, and what we, as a society, need to stand for. Privacy is not a luxury. It is a right. And it is time for all of us to take back control of our data." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in before continuing. "I know some of you will say I've been part of the problem. That I've contributed to the very culture of surveillance that I'm now fighting against. And you're right. I've been part of that system. I've helped build it. But I've learned. We've all learned. And we're going to do better." Elon's voice was firm. "This is bigger than me, bigger than my companies. This is about building a future where every person has control over their own data, their own information. We have the power to change the game, and it starts now." The media's reaction was immediate. Some outlets continued their attacks, accusing Elon of trying to salvage his reputation. But the tone was different this time. There was a shift in the conversation. For every critic, there was a growing chorus of support. More and more people were beginning to see Elon's point of view, not just as a billionaire trying to protect his family, but as a leader in a global movement. But as with any battle, this was only the beginning. The media storm had passed, but new challenges were on the horizon. As Elon Musk set his sights on changing the world of data privacy, he knew that the fight was far from over. He had set the stage. Now, it was time to see if the world was ready to follow. Elon Musk's bold stance on privacy had shaken the media landscape, but it had also set a chain of events into motion that no one, not even Elon himself, could fully anticipate. As the weeks passed, the public conversation shifted. For every article accusing him of hypocrisy, there was another praising him for his commitment to privacy reform. The noise was deafening, but it was the kind of noise that came with progress, and Elon was determined to see it through. However, as his message gained traction, so too did the pressure from forces that did not want this revolution to succeed. Tech giants, corporations, and governments began to take notice, and they weren't pleased. The idea that ordinary citizens might reclaim control of their data was a direct threat to the established order. The status quo was built on surveillance and data exploitation. Those in power were not going to let go of that so easily. The first signs of resistance came in the form of an anonymous, highly coordinated campaign aimed at discrediting Elon further. Mysterious ads began popping up on social media platforms, targeted at undermining his credibility. Musk's privacy crusade, a billionaire's scam to hide his own secrets, was one such headline. There were others, more subtle in nature, suggesting that his newfound privacy advocacy was a ploy to distract from the alleged environmental impact of his companies or his rumored financial mismanagement. While these efforts were sophisticated, they didn't hold water. The public, for the most part, was smart enough to see through them. But there was a more insidious force at work, one that operated behind closed doors. Elon sat in a meeting with his top advisors, the atmosphere thick with tension. He had been receiving reports of increased surveillance on his communications and company activities, with mysterious government officials allegedly inquiring about his data privacy reforms. The quiet murmurings suggested that this fight was no longer just about public opinion, it was now a high-stakes battle against a powerful, unseen adversary. "We need to be ready," said Kelly, Elon's communications director. "This goes beyond the media. Whoever is behind these attacks is playing a long game. They're looking for cracks in our foundation, hoping we'll slip up. Elon leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. I knew this wouldn't be easy. But it's more than just about defending myself. This is about a whole new world. A world where every individual can control their own data. Where privacy isn't a privilege, it's a right. He paused, considering his next words carefully. We've been too passive in responding. It's time we turn the tables. We need to expose this system for what it is. We can't wait for them to come at us, we need to show the world who the real enemy is. Kelly nodded. We'll need evidence, clear, indisputable evidence that points to the people trying to undermine you. Elon's eyes sparkled with determination. I'll find it. I'll go straight to the source. As the media war raged on, Elon's team worked tirelessly behind the scenes. They dug into the finances of various tech companies, cross-referenced political donations, and sifted through corporate lobbying records. What they uncovered was shocking. A network of political and corporate interests had quietly been aligning to discredit Musk and his privacy movement. It wasn't just about protecting data, it was about maintaining control. These entities had far too much to lose if the world started waking up to the reality of digital surveillance. But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous things became. The threats escalated, and Elon knew that things were about to get personal. One evening, after a long day of work, he received a text from an unknown number. The message was simple, chilling: we know where your family lives. Stop your campaign now, or else. Elon's hand tightened around his phone. He felt a surge of anger, but there was no fear in his heart. This was the moment he had been preparing for. He had made a promise to his family, to his son, to himself. He would not back down. He immediately forwarded the message to his security team, instructing them to beef up the safety measures around his family. Then, with steely resolve, he took to Twitter. Privacy is a right, not a luxury. I won't back down, no matter the threats. The fight for privacy isn't just for my family, it's for every family. We have the power to protect ourselves. The tweet was bold, and it sent shockwaves across the internet. It was clear that Elon was no longer playing defense. This was war. In the days that followed, the media frenzy escalated. Articles were being published at a rate that was hard to keep up with. Some praised Elon for standing up to what they now saw as a corporate cartel, while others smeared him as a paranoid billionaire trying to distract the public from his own misdeeds. The noise was deafening, but it was also a sign that his message was getting through. Elon knew that to truly change the system, he had to go beyond social media and traditional PR strategies. He needed to get the truth directly into people's hands. He began working with a team of whistleblowers, individuals from within the tech industry who were willing to share inside information about the shady practices of the surveillance economy. Together, they would release a report, a deep dive into the darkest corners of the data industry. It was a calculated risk, but one that Elon was ready to take. The stakes were higher than ever. The report would expose not just the companies involved in mass surveillance, but the entire system that had been built to profit from personal information. He knew it would be controversial, but that was exactly what was needed to wake people up to the truth. But just as Elon and his team were preparing to release the damning report, a new complication arose. The media, the government, and the tech companies weren't the only ones who had taken notice of his efforts. The public, too, had started asking questions. And in the background, the tech industry's rival companies, particularly Apple and Google, were beginning to shift their narratives in subtle but telling ways. Apple, which had long touted itself as the defender of privacy, suddenly released a new set of privacy features that were eerily similar to the proposals Musk had been pushing. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Apple was clearly trying to steal some of the thunder from Musk's movement, while still aligning itself with the privacy cause. Meanwhile, Google, under the guise of corporate social responsibility, began announcing new initiatives focused on data protection. The moves by these tech giants seemed calculated to undermine Elon's position while co-opting his messaging. Elon wasn't naive. He knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't trying to solve the privacy problem, they were trying to control the narrative. They wanted to be seen as the good guys, all while continuing to profit from user data. It became clearer than ever, the battle for privacy wasn't just about creating laws or public awareness. It was about exposing the truth and making sure that no one company, no matter how powerful, could dictate the rules of the game. Elon sat in his office late into the night, the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders. His son, Xii, was asleep at home, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing. Elon thought about his son and the world he hoped to create for him, a world where privacy was sacred, not a commodity to be bought and sold. This was bigger than one man, one company, or even one family. This was about changing the course of history. And Elon Musk was just getting started. The storm that had been gathering around Elon Musk for weeks now reached its peak. Every move he made was scrutinized, every word he spoke twisted, and every action he took became the subject of fierce debate. Yet, despite the attacks, despite the mounting pressure, Elon remained resolute. He had no intention of backing down. The release of the report, an exhaustive exposé detailing the corrupt practices of the tech industry and its manipulation of personal data, was imminent. It was the final piece in his carefully laid plan to shift the public narrative, and Elon knew that once it was out, there would be no going back. He had to act swiftly, but he also had to be calculated. If the wrong people controlled the message, it could backfire. His team worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that the report would be distributed directly to the public. No press conference, no interviews with biased journalists. This had to be raw, unfiltered information that couldn't be misrepresented by those who stood to lose the most. The day the report was set to release, Elon stood in his office, staring at his computer screen. The document was ready. The evidence was airtight. He knew this was the moment that would either make or break his crusade for privacy. "Are we ready?" he asked, his voice calm but tense. Kelly, his communications director, stepped forward. "The timing's perfect. The report will go live in the next 30 minutes. We'll be posting it across every social media platform, every channel we have. No one can stop this." Elon nodded. "Good. Let's make sure the world hears this, loud and clear." At exactly 10 a.m., the report went live. The title, simple yet striking, read, "The Surveillance Economy: How Tech Giants Manipulate Our Privacy for Profit." The document contained an in-depth breakdown of the surveillance practices of companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, and Facebook, companies that had long touted themselves as protectors of privacy while secretly exploiting personal data for their own gain. The report was brutal. It revealed how these companies used consumer data to manipulate behavior, track movements, and even predict personal decisions. It exposed the inner workings of corporate lobbying efforts aimed at stifling privacy laws and regulations that would limit their access to user data. It named names, and it didn't pull any punches. For Elon, the release of this report was not just a chance to expose the truth, it was his final attempt to rally the public. He knew that this was the moment of reckoning. It was either a resounding success or a catastrophic failure. There would be no middle ground. The response was immediate, and it was seismic. News outlets around the world picked up the story within hours. Headlines blared, "Elon Musk takes on tech giants in exposé of massive data exploitation," and "Privacy advocate Musk unmasks the dark side of big tech." The media frenzy was in full swing, but this time, the conversation was different. The report was too well documented, too detailed, for the usual smears and distractions to take hold. Elon had effectively turned the tables. But while the media buzzed with excitement, a new wave of controversy was beginning to rise. Tech companies, predictably, began to fire back. Apple, in an uncharacteristic move, issued a statement declaring that it had always been committed to user privacy, and that it would continue to lead the way in protecting consumer data. The company promised to introduce even stricter privacy policies in the coming months, but it was clear that their reaction was an attempt to shift the conversation away from the damning report Elon had just released. Google, too, issued a rebuttal, claiming that it had always followed industry-leading privacy standards, and that it was dedicated to transparency in all of its data practices. These corporate giants were doing everything they could to reassert control over the narrative, but it was too late. Elon had already shifted the conversation, and now, the world was paying attention. Yet, even as the tech companies scrambled to save face, Elon's team began to uncover troubling new developments. Whispers in the halls of power. Rumors of political influence being exerted to suppress the findings of the report. And the most alarming discovery of all, the deep ties between these tech companies and powerful lobbying groups who were working to derail any meaningful change to data privacy laws. Elon's team, ever vigilant, dug deeper. They discovered connections between major political figures and tech CEOs that had been concealed for years. It wasn't just about data. It was about control, about keeping the masses in line through surveillance, manipulation, and the commodification of their most intimate personal details. But as Elon prepared to take his fight to the next level, the threats against his family began to intensify. This wasn't just about him anymore. His son, Xii, was now in the crosshairs of those who wanted to silence him. Elon could no longer afford to be passive. He had to make a stand, not just for privacy, but for his family's safety. That night, as the pressure continued to mount, Elon made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't just expose the truth, he had to do more. He would take the fight directly to the institutions that had allowed this system to thrive. The next day, he called for a live, televised address, a moment where he would speak directly to the world, no holds barred. It was time to declare war on the surveillance state. The world needed to know that this fight wasn't just about one man, one company, or even one family, it was about the future of freedom itself. As the cameras rolled and the world tuned in, Elon took a deep breath. The stakes had never been higher. He looked directly into the lens, addressing the millions who were watching. This is not just a fight for my privacy, or for my family's safety, he said, his voice steady but intense. This is a fight for the future of every individual. Every single one of us has the right to control our own data, our own lives. We cannot let these corporations continue to profit from our most personal information. And we cannot let them continue to dictate the rules of the game. He paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. I'm not asking for your support. I'm demanding it. The time to act is now. We're taking back control. Not just for us, but for our children, for the generations to come. The broadcast ended, but the world was only beginning to process what Elon had just said. There was no going back now. Elon Musk had lit the fuse. The battle for privacy had officially begun. Elon Musk had made his declaration. The world had heard his call. But the consequences of his actions were still unfolding. As his message spread, the powerful forces that had kept the surveillance economy running smoothly for decades were now scrambling to respond. They had underestimated him, and now, the walls were closing in. In the days following his broadcast, Elon's social media accounts exploded with messages of support from around the world. Citizens, privacy advocates, and everyday people began to rally behind him. Hashtags like #PrivacyForAll and #Musk vs Big Tech trended on Twitter, and protests began to form in major cities. People were demanding change, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like the tide was turning. But for every person who rallied behind him, there were others, those who had a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. Politicians, lobbyists, and tech executives were all working behind the scenes to protect their interests. And they weren't going to let Elon's challenge to the surveillance state go unanswered. Elon knew that the stakes had just been raised to an entirely new level. This wasn't just a battle for privacy anymore. It was a battle for the very foundation of the modern world. And he was at the center of it all. Inside the glass-walled boardrooms of Silicon Valley's most powerful companies, the executives were in full-blown crisis mode. Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, had spent hours in private meetings, strategizing ways to maintain the company's position in the market while salvaging its reputation. Google's Sundar Pichai, meanwhile, was having similar discussions with his inner circle. The message was clear: Elon Musk's challenge to the surveillance economy could not be allowed to succeed. "Tim, we have to move fast," one of Apple's top advisors said. "The momentum he's gaining is dangerous. If we don't act now, we could lose everything." "I agree," Cook replied, his voice measured but filled with urgency. "But we have to be careful. We can't afford to escalate this too quickly. We need to undermine his credibility without making it look like we're retaliating. We need to discredit him, make him appear as a disruptor with no real solutions." "But if we do nothing," the advisor countered, "his influence will only grow. We risk losing our stranglehold on the market. And we cannot allow that." In Washington, D.C., the response was equally intense. Lawmakers who had long been friendly with the tech giants began to feel the heat. Lobbyists from Google, Amazon, and Facebook were working overtime, trying to secure new legislation that would blunt the impact of Elon's privacy campaign. The tech companies were pouring millions of dollars into political contributions, attempting to influence key senators and representatives. They needed to contain this movement before it could spread further. But Elon wasn't backing down. He knew that these forces were powerful, but he also knew that the public was on his side. The people were tired of being treated as products. Tired of their personal lives being mined for profit. And Elon, the man who had revolutionized space travel, electric cars, and artificial intelligence, was now ready to take on the most formidable opponent of all, the system itself. Behind the scenes, Elon's team was working around the clock to gather more evidence, data, documents, insider testimonies, that would further expose the lengths to which these tech giants were willing to go to protect their interests. They were building a case that would force the world to confront the reality of the surveillance economy head-on. One afternoon, as Elon was preparing for yet another high-stakes meeting, his phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was a text from Kelly, his communications director. "We've got something big. It's going to blow this whole thing wide open." Elon's heart skipped a beat. What now? He thought. He quickly opened the message. Kelly had attached a document, a detailed report outlining how one of the tech giants had secretly been collaborating with foreign governments to collect and store citizens' data without their knowledge or consent. The evidence was shocking, and it was clear that it had the potential to rock the entire tech industry. "Elon," Kelly's message continued, "this is bigger than we thought. If we go public with this, we'll have undeniable proof of the system's corruption. But we need to be prepared for the fallout." Elon's mind raced. This was it, the smoking gun. The evidence he needed to destroy the credibility of the tech companies once and for all. He responded quickly, "Prepare a team. We'll make it public in 48 hours." As the days ticked by, the tension continued to mount. Elon's team knew that the tech giants would be watching closely. They would stop at nothing to prevent this revelation from reaching the public. But Elon had prepared for this. He wasn't about to let them control the narrative. The night before the report was set to release, Elon sat alone in his office. His thoughts were racing as he thought about his son, Xii. His boy had no idea how much his father had sacrificed to give him a better future. Elon smiled to himself. "I'm doing this for him," he thought. "For all the children who deserve a world where privacy is respected." Just as he was about to close his laptop, he received a call. It was from one of his top legal advisors, and the urgency in her voice was unmistakable. "Elon, we've just been alerted to something you need to know," she said. "The government is preparing to move against you. We don't know exactly when or how, but they're making their move. And it's going to be big. Elon's jaw clenched. I expected this, he replied, his voice calm but resolute. But it doesn't matter. We're not stopping. The next day, the bombshell report went live. The world couldn't ignore it. The revelations were staggering. The tech giants, working in tandem with foreign governments, had orchestrated a covert operation to harvest citizens' data on an unprecedented scale. It was a game-changer, a scandal of epic proportions. As the report spread like wildfire, the public response was swift and overwhelming. People were furious. The government, caught in the crossfire, had no choice but to launch an investigation into the matter. Public trust in the tech giants plummeted, and Elon Musk's name became synonymous with the fight for privacy rights. But the battle was far from over. The tech companies weren't going to take this lying down. And now, Elon knew that the fight had entered a new phase. The stakes had never been higher. Elon Musk had done it. The explosive report had sent shockwaves across the world. The tech giants, the government, and every powerful figure who had benefited from the surveillance economy were now on the defensive. For the first time in years, it seemed like the people had a real shot at reclaiming their privacy, their data, and their freedom. But while the public rallied behind him, the true scope of the forces he was up against was just beginning to unfold. The tech industry had never been so exposed. And now, as Elon's report became a global phenomenon, the counterattacks began in earnest. The following morning, the headlines were dominated by a single question: how will the tech giants respond to Musk's revelations? It didn't take long for the first major retaliation to unfold. Apple, Google, Facebook, and Amazon released a joint statement, condemning the report as inaccurate and irresponsible. They called the allegations baseless and promised to cooperate fully with any investigations into their practices. But this was just the beginning. Behind closed doors, the pressure on lawmakers was escalating. Lobbyists from the tech companies were pulling all the strings they could to ensure that any legislation aimed at limiting their power would be blocked. There were even whispers that certain government officials were planning to launch a smear campaign against Elon Musk himself, attempting to discredit his findings and paint him as a paranoid, erratic billionaire. And as for the media? It was already clear that they would be just as divided as the public. Some outlets supported Elon's crusade for privacy, while others questioned his motivations and whether his allegations were exaggerated. The corporate media, whose relationships with the tech companies had been long-standing, were working overtime to muddy the waters. In Elon's camp, the mood was tense. His team had expected this kind of backlash, but the speed and coordination of the response were something else. It was clear that the tech giants weren't going to let this go quietly. Kelly, his communications director, was the first to break the news. She stormed into his office, holding a tablet in her hand. "Elon, you need to see this," she said, her voice urgent. Elon looked up from his desk, his fingers paused over his laptop keyboard. Kelly showed him a video that had just been released on several social media platforms. It was a clip of Elon from a previous interview, taken out of context, and edited to make him look like a paranoid conspiracy theorist. The video had been expertly manipulated. It featured Elon discussing the potential risks of artificial intelligence and surveillance in a way that made him appear completely unhinged. The media quickly latched onto it, with several major outlets running the video on loop, calling into question his credibility. "They're trying to paint me as crazy," Elon said, his jaw tightening. "I should have known they'd go this route." Kelly nodded. "They're using the same playbook they've used with every other whistleblower. Discredit, distort, distract." Elon took a deep breath. This was a pivotal moment. He couldn't allow this smear campaign to derail everything he had worked for. "We have to fight back," he said firmly. "But we need a new strategy. We need to take the narrative away from them." It was time for Elon to do what he did best, disrupt the narrative. The next day, he scheduled an emergency live stream, a direct address to his supporters. He knew this was going to be a high-stakes move. If he could stay calm and focused, he could flip the script and use the attack against him to his advantage. But if he faltered, the smear campaign could take root and spread like wildfire. The live stream began, and Elon appeared on screen, looking composed and confident. "I know many of you have seen the video circulating online," he began. "I've seen it too. And I want to address it directly." His tone was calm but firm, as though he had anticipated every possible question. "Yes, I've spoken about the dangers of AI and surveillance. But I've also been clear that these are real threats, and the time to address them is now. The reality we're facing is far more dangerous than a video clip or a headline. The tech giants have spent decades profiting off of our data, and they will do whatever it takes to stop anyone who stands in their way." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "I know the forces I'm up against. But I also know that the truth is on our side. The report we released is just the beginning. This fight isn't just about me. It's about all of us. It's about the future of privacy, the future of our digital lives." As Elon spoke, his team was working behind the scenes to amplify his message. They released more damning documents, more insider testimonies, and even video interviews with whistleblowers who had been involved in the surveillance programs. The information flooded the internet, and the momentum continued to build. In the days that followed, the pressure on the tech giants intensified. For every attempt to discredit Elon, he had an answer, a well-researched rebuttal or a new piece of evidence that kept the public's attention fixed on the real issue at hand. And all the while, the voices supporting his cause grew louder. But the tech companies were not backing down. They launched an all-out assault on Musk's reputation, leveraging their vast networks to smear him even further. At the same time, they pushed for legal measures that would attempt to shut down his ability to freely distribute information. Their allies in the government worked in tandem, with one official going so far as to suggest that Elon's activities could be investigated for national security threats. It was clear now, the fight was about more than privacy. It was about power. The tech giants, with their control over data and information, were not just fighting for profits, they were fighting to maintain their dominance over the digital world. In response, Elon doubled down. He wasn't just fighting for privacy anymore, he was fighting for freedom itself. And he knew that the battle was far from over. The forces arrayed against him were vast and powerful, but he wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. He had faced setbacks before, but each time, he had risen stronger. This was no different. "Elon," Kelly said later that evening, looking at him with determination in her eyes. "We're not backing down. We have the truth on our side. We just need to keep pushing." Elon smiled. "And that's exactly what we're going to do." Elon Musk had made his stand. The revelations were out in the open, the tech giants were on the defensive, and the world had begun to take notice. What had started as a fight to protect individual privacy had evolved into a global movement, one that was shaking the very foundations of the modern world. Yet, despite the growing support from the public, the battle was far from over. The tech industry's counterattacks were intensifying, and they had turned to their most powerful weapon, political influence. In Washington, D.C., lobbyists were pulling strings with greater urgency than ever. High-profile senators and representatives were beginning to introduce new bills that would attempt to neutralize Elon's influence and protect the interests of the big tech companies. But what the opposition failed to account for was the power of public opinion. Elon had always known that he was in a fight against powerful forces, but now the pressure had reached a fever pitch. His team was constantly updating him with new developments, often in the form of alarming news. One day, Kelly walked into his office, her face grim. She handed him a tablet, and he saw the headline. "Governments around the world begin considering crackdowns on Musk's revelations." "International governments are starting to step in," she said quietly. "Several European countries are introducing new legislation aimed at limiting our ability to share these reports, especially the ones implicating foreign governments." They're using the data protection laws to create barriers to transparency. Elon scrolled through the article, his jaw tightening as he absorbed the information. The world was beginning to divide itself into two factions, those who saw the value of transparency and privacy, and those who were too deeply invested in the current order to allow for change. I knew they'd play the political card, Elon said after a long pause. But what they don't realize is that the more they try to shut us down, the louder our message becomes. A few days later, a major international summit took place in Geneva. World leaders, tech moguls, and diplomats gathered to discuss global data protection and privacy standards. The conference was billed as a critical event in the battle for digital privacy, but it was clear that it would also be a battleground for control over the global narrative. Elon was not invited to the summit. It was a calculated move by the tech giants, who understood that if Elon was allowed to speak, it would embolden the movement and shift the conversation even further. Instead, the summit would be dominated by representatives from the biggest corporations, all of whom were working to maintain their grip on the digital world. But Elon wasn't one to let exclusion dictate his actions. He scheduled a press conference, determined to speak directly to the people, bypassing the establishment entirely. His message was clear: the real issue wasn't government regulation, it was corporate control over citizens' data. As the day of the press conference arrived, reporters from around the globe gathered in a massive auditorium. The air was thick with anticipation. Elon took the stage, his figure unmistakable against the backdrop of the assembled media. He didn't waste any time. The global elite gathered in Geneva are not interested in solving the privacy crisis, Elon began. They're there to protect their own interests. The tech giants don't want to fix the system, they want to maintain control over it. What they don't realize is that people all over the world are waking up. We won't allow our data to be used as a commodity. We won't allow our privacy to be violated in the name of profit. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. It was a powerful moment, and the impact was immediate. News outlets across the world began covering his speech, broadcasting his call for action. But the real game-changer came when a surprising ally stepped forward, the European Union. In a move that shocked many, the EU announced a new set of regulations aimed at holding tech companies accountable for their data practices. The regulations were not a complete victory for Elon, but they represented a significant shift. The European Commission's president, Ursula von der Leyen, gave a public statement endorsing transparency and accountability, calling for a global standard on data privacy that would protect citizens from exploitation. The European Union is committed to safeguarding the rights of our citizens, von der Leyen said in her speech. We will not allow our people to be sold to the highest bidder. Our goal is to create a framework that ensures transparency in data usage, security, and respect for privacy. This was a huge development. The tech giants had always seen Europe as a potential obstacle to their goals, and now, they were facing an unprecedented challenge from within their own industry. Elon's team was ecstatic. This was a rare win, a sign that the tide was beginning to turn. But there was still much to be done. Elon knew that the fight was far from over. The tech giants would not go down without a fight, and there was still the matter of the growing opposition within the U.S. government. In the U.S., the battle for privacy had reached new heights. President Matthew Carlson, who had been hesitant to take sides in the beginning, was now facing increasing pressure from both sides of the political spectrum. His advisors had urged him to remain neutral, but his political opponents were starting to draw lines in the sand. Carlson had been privately meeting with members of Congress, as well as tech executives, who had started to frame the debate as a matter of national security. They painted Elon's movement as a direct threat to the U.S. economy and its global position in the tech industry. Elon had expected this. It was a predictable response from those who were heavily invested in the current system. But as the weeks went on, Carlson began to realize that the tide was turning. Public sentiment was shifting, and people were demanding that their government protect their rights rather than bowing to corporate pressure. I can't ignore this anymore, Carlson told his advisors one evening, a hint of frustration in his voice. "We have to stand with the people, not the corporations." His decision was a turning point, and it signaled that even the highest levels of government were beginning to acknowledge the shifting winds. Back in Silicon Valley, the tech giants were beginning to regroup. Apple, Google, and Amazon had launched new lobbying efforts, pushing for more stringent regulations on privacy that would allow them to maintain control. Their strategy was clear: if they could control the regulatory landscape, they could survive the storm. They knew they had to move fast. But Elon wasn't about to let them win. As the global stage grew more intense, so did his resolve. This wasn't just a fight for the future of privacy, it was a fight for freedom itself. The stakes were higher than ever. But Elon had a plan. And he knew that the world was watching. The momentum of Elon Musk's privacy crusade was undeniable. Around the world, activists, tech enthusiasts, and everyday citizens were beginning to rally behind him. What started as a fight for transparency had become a full-scale movement, one that challenged the very fabric of the tech industry's control over personal data. The shift in public opinion was palpable. The pressure was mounting, and with it came the inevitable escalation of the battle. But despite the growing support from the people, the enemies Elon was facing were formidable. The tech giants, feeling the heat, were ramping up their tactics. They understood that if they lost this fight, it would be the beginning of the end for their unchecked power. They weren't just defending their profits anymore, they were defending their very existence. One evening, Elon sat at a round table in his office with Kelly and his closest advisors. The weight of the situation was heavier than ever. "Elon, they're escalating," Kelly said, breaking the silence. "We've seen coordinated attacks from both the tech companies and some political players. The media is ramping up the disinformation campaign. They're calling us radicals, anti-business. They're framing us as a threat to the economy." Elon exhaled deeply, leaning back in his chair. "I expected this. We've exposed them, and now they'll do everything they can to stop us. But we have something they don't, the truth. People know what's at stake." "I agree," one of his other advisors, Daniel, added. "But we need to be ready for what's coming next. There's a high probability that they'll try to escalate this into a legal battle, perhaps even try to get the government involved." Kelly nodded. "We've already seen some legal challenges from the big players. They've started calling for investigations into Musk Enterprises. They'll try to paint us as a rogue operation that's out to destabilize the industry." The next day, Elon appeared on a major news network for a live interview. The host, known for his skepticism of Musk, was eager to press him on the more controversial aspects of the movement. "Elon," the host began, "you've become a household name in the past few weeks, but not just for your groundbreaking work in space and electric cars. Your recent privacy report has sparked an international debate, and many are now questioning whether your revelations are a genuine concern or just another attempt at creating a disruption." Elon's expression remained neutral, but his eyes gleamed with intensity. He had prepared for this moment. "I'm not here to create a disruption. I'm here because we're facing a massive problem. The unchecked power of these tech giants is threatening the very essence of privacy and freedom. They've turned our data into a commodity, and they've been using it against us." The host raised an eyebrow. "But many would argue that these companies have provided valuable services that have improved lives. You're essentially attacking the very companies that have driven innovation in the modern world. How do you reconcile that?" Elon didn't flinch. "These companies have innovated, yes. But at what cost? They've built their empires on our personal data. That data is no longer just about convenience, it's about control. And it's time we take that power back. If we don't, we risk losing everything." The interview was just one piece of a larger campaign. Elon's team was working around the clock to flood the media with his message, putting out statements, interviews, and op-eds that emphasized the growing threat posed by the surveillance state. They also began organizing massive rallies in key cities across the US and Europe, aiming to put pressure on lawmakers and business leaders who were still in denial about the dangers posed by the tech giants. But as the movement gained traction, so did the resistance. The tech companies had been taking note of the rising tide, and their reactions were becoming more desperate. They knew that the public was waking up, and if they didn't act fast, they could lose everything. One evening, as Elon sat in his office reviewing some documents, his phone rang. It was a private number. Elon, a familiar voice on the other end said, "It's Steve." Steve Jobs' voice, despite being absent from the physical world for years, had a hauntingly familiar tone. Elon had always looked up to Steve, admired his vision, and thought of him as a kindred spirit in the tech world. But now, Steve's legacy seemed to be at the heart of the very problem Elon was trying to solve. "Steve?" Elon's voice was calm, yet tinged with curiosity. "What's this about?" "I've been watching closely," Steve's voice continued. "You've exposed something that was always there, Elon. Something that many of us, even those at Apple, were complicit in." Elon's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I'm saying that when we were building Apple, we were driven by the belief that we could change the world. But along the way, we forgot what mattered most. Privacy. People's right to control their own lives." Elon paused, considering the weight of Steve's words. "So, you agree with me? That the tech companies have gone too far?" "I do," Steve said firmly. "And the truth is, I wish I had done more when I had the chance. But you have a rare opportunity, Elon. If you're going to take this fight all the way, you'll need more than just public support. You'll need to make a choice. Do you fight the system as it is, or do you change it from the inside out?" The line went silent for a moment. Elon sat back in his chair, pondering Steve's words. He realized that this wasn't just about privacy anymore, it was about reshaping the entire system, about creating a future that was sustainable and ethical. "I'll fight it," Elon finally said, determination building in his voice. "And I'll win." As the days passed, Elon's resolve only grew stronger. The fight was no longer just about privacy or data, it was about restoring balance to a world that had been skewed by unchecked corporate power. Every rally, every interview, every piece of evidence he released was a step closer to his goal. But the real tipping point was coming. The tech giants were making their final play, and Elon knew that he had to strike first. The stakes were higher than ever. With Elon Musk's movement gaining unprecedented momentum and the public rallying behind him, the tech giants were scrambling. They had lost control of the narrative, and now they were about to unleash their most powerful weapon, the legal system. Elon had known that this moment would come. The billion-dollar lawsuits, the PR campaigns, and the backroom deals, he had been preparing for this battle from the very beginning. But now, it was all about to go down. It was a cold, overcast morning in Silicon Valley when Elon received the call. Kelly's voice was grave as she spoke. "Elon, they've filed." "Who?" Elon asked, his voice sharp. "The tech consortium, Apple, Google, Amazon. They've officially filed a lawsuit against Musk Enterprises, claiming that your revelations about their practices are harmful to national security. They've got heavy hitters in Washington backing them up, and they're framing this as a national emergency." Elon's heart sank, but he didn't let the weight of the news show. He had anticipated this move. "Send me the details. We'll be ready." Later that afternoon, Elon sat in a private meeting with his legal team. The lawsuit was everything they had feared, an all-out assault on Musk Enterprises, accusing them of endangering national security by exposing corporate secrets. The tech giants were painting him as a reckless disruptor, claiming that his actions had created a dangerous precedent for global cybersecurity. "It's a full-on attack," one of the senior lawyers said, adjusting his glasses. "They're going for the jugular, accusing us of being unpatriotic and jeopardizing international alliances. If we lose this case, it could set back the movement for years." Elon nodded, his face hardening. We're not losing this case. This is their last move. If we fight back with everything we've got, we can end this once and for all. The media frenzy surrounding the lawsuit was like nothing Elon had ever experienced. News outlets from all over the world were covering the legal battle. Analysts speculated about the potential outcomes. Would the US government side with the tech giants, or would Elon's supporters, the masses who had rallied behind him, have enough influence to sway the court of public opinion? Elon knew the stakes were not just about winning in court. The true battle would be fought in the hearts and minds of the people. If they could keep the public on their side, they could win this fight before it even reached the courtroom. To prepare, Elon's team released an unprecedented amount of data, showing the extent to which the tech giants had exploited user information. They provided evidence that had previously been kept hidden, showing the depth of the surveillance state that had been built over the past 2 decades. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Protests broke out in cities across the globe. Citizens held signs reading #FreedomOverFear and #PrivacyForAll. The momentum that had been building for weeks had reached a tipping point. Social media was flooded with support for Musk's cause, with hashtags trending worldwide. The message was clear: people were done being controlled. In Washington, D.C., senators and representatives, some who had previously remained neutral, began to speak out against the lawsuit. The pressure from their constituents was impossible to ignore. Calls flooded their offices, demanding they take a stand in defense of privacy rights. The day before the court hearing, Elon gathered his team for a final strategy session. He stood at the head of the room, addressing the group with the same intensity that had driven him to take on the tech giants in the first place. "This is it," he said. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about the future. About whether we let a few corporations control our lives, or if we take a stand for freedom, privacy, and truth. We're not backing down. Tomorrow, we make sure they know we won't let them win." Kelly nodded, a fire in her eyes. "We've got this." The courtroom was packed. Media from around the world, representatives from tech companies, and supporters of Elon Musk had all gathered to witness the pivotal moment. The courtroom buzzed with energy as both sides prepared for battle. On one side, the tech consortium's legal team, armed with resources that only the richest corporations could afford. On the other, Musk Enterprises, a team of dedicated legal minds and activists fighting for transparency and privacy. As the judge took his seat, the room fell silent. Elon sat with his legal team, his mind sharp and focused. Across from him, the opposition was well prepared, their attorneys already setting up their case. The opening statements were intense, with the opposition painting Elon as a dangerous radical, a person willing to put global security at risk for personal gain. But when it was Elon's turn to speak, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. He stood up, his calm demeanor commanding attention. "We are here today not to attack anyone. We're here because we believe in a future where privacy is a fundamental right, not a privilege," Elon began. "For years, these companies have manipulated the system, selling our data to the highest bidder, infringing upon our most basic freedoms. I stand here today not as a businessman, but as a citizen of this world, demanding transparency and accountability. If we don't take a stand now, we risk losing our humanity to the machines." The room was silent. The weight of his words settled over everyone. As the trial proceeded, evidence was presented, and testimonies were heard. But it was clear that the tech giants' case was unraveling. The more they tried to defend their actions, the more holes appeared in their arguments. Musk Enterprises had not only exposed the truth, they had given the public the tools to see it for themselves. The final moment came when Elon took the stand. He was asked about his motivations, his ambitions, and his vision for the future. His response was simple, but it carried immense power. "I want to live in a world where people have control over their own data. A world where we are not commodities, where our lives are not for sale. I want to be part of creating a future where technology serves us, not the other way around. The verdict was delivered in a packed courtroom. The judge ruled in favor of Musk Enterprises, stating that the tech giants had indeed violated ethical standards in their data practices. It wasn't an outright victory, but it was a significant blow to their power. The court also mandated that the companies were required to disclose their data collection practices and put more stringent measures in place to protect user privacy. But the real victory came in the form of public perception. The tide had officially turned. The battle was not over, but Elon had won an important victory. He knew that the fight for privacy and transparency was far from finished, but today, they had proven that it was possible to challenge the power of the tech giants, and win. And as he stood on the steps of the courthouse, the world watching, Elon Musk couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. This was just the beginning. Elon stood on the courthouse steps, the weight of the moment settling in. The battle he had fought, against the tech giants, against misinformation, against the very infrastructure that governed the digital world, had culminated in a victory that no one, not even his fiercest critics, had expected. The ruling was a decisive blow to the power of the corporations, but more importantly, it symbolized something greater, a shift in the balance of power. The world watched as Elon addressed the press, his words deliberate and impactful. Today is not just a victory for Musk Enterprises. Today is a victory for privacy, for the rights of individuals, and for the future of our digital lives, he said, his voice steady. We have proven that no one, no corporation, is above the law. It's time to rebuild this system, together. As he spoke, cameras flashed, capturing every moment. But beyond the media frenzy, Elon knew that the hard work was just beginning. The legal victory was a step forward, but the true change would require more than just courtroom wins. It would require a cultural shift, a reimagining of how society viewed privacy and the power of corporations. In the days following the ruling, the ripple effect was immediate. Public opinion had shifted dramatically. People across the globe were demanding more control over their personal data, and governments began to take notice. Lawmakers who had previously remained silent on the issue of data privacy were now speaking out in favor of stronger regulations. The European Union, already leading the charge with its GDPR regulations, began drafting even stricter policies, while countries in Asia and North America started to follow suit. But while the public was rallying behind the cause, the tech giants were not giving up easily. The ruling, though a blow, had not destroyed their power, merely cracked it. They began to regroup, realizing that the only way to win was to discredit Musk, to undermine the public's faith in the very principles he was fighting for. Elon knew that they would stop at nothing to maintain control. The next phase of the battle would not just be fought in the courts or in the streets, it would be fought in the hearts and minds of people everywhere. It wasn't long before the first wave of retaliation came. It started small, whispers in the media, coordinated campaigns to paint Musk as a villain, a disruptor who couldn't be trusted. They knew that if they could erode his credibility, they could undermine the entire movement. The attacks came from all sides. Some of the most well-known journalists in the industry, those who had once praised Musk's innovations, began to question his motives. They accused him of using the privacy fight as a smokescreen for his personal ambitions, painting him as a self-serving billionaire with no true interest in protecting the public. Some even went so far as to suggest that his desire for transparency was merely a way to distract from his own company's questionable practices. At first, Elon felt the weight of the attacks. The media had always been a powerful force, but now, they were turning against him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It felt like a constant barrage, one that chipped away at his public image bit by bit. But Elon had never been one to back down from a challenge. He knew that if he allowed himself to be dragged into a battle of optics, he would lose. Instead, he focused on the truth. He doubled down on his message, pouring resources into campaigns that highlighted the real issues, the surveillance state, the exploitation of personal data, and the growing need for accountability in the tech industry. He also made a strategic decision. He would not engage directly with the media attacks. Instead, he would speak directly to the people. Social media became his platform of choice, where he could share unfiltered messages, ideas, and evidence that countered the false narratives being spread about him. And gradually, the tide began to shift once more. The more the tech companies attempted to tear him down, the more the public saw through the smokescreen. They recognized the power of his message, the sincerity of his actions, and the importance of the fight he was leading. Then came the moment that would turn the tide for good. Elon had been working on a major initiative in secret, one that would not only demonstrate his commitment to privacy, but also offer a real-world solution to the very problem he had exposed. It was time to unveil it. He stood before a packed auditorium, the world's media gathered once again, cameras poised and ready. But this time, it wasn't a legal victory or a political statement. It was something more. Something that could change the game entirely. Elon Musk Enterprises, he began, has always been about innovation, about pushing the boundaries of what is possible. But today, we're taking that innovation to the next level. Today, we're launching a new platform, a decentralized, privacy-first digital network, one that gives individuals control over their data, their communications, and their digital lives. We call it TrueNet. The audience erupted into applause, but Elon continued, his voice resolute. TrueNet is a platform built from the ground up on the principles of transparency, privacy, and security. It is not owned by any corporation. It is not controlled by any government. It is owned and governed by the people who use it. This is the future of the Internet. TrueNet was everything that Elon had promised, a decentralized platform where users had full control over their data. It was powered by blockchain technology, ensuring that information could not be manipulated or sold. It allowed individuals to create their own digital identities, protect their privacy, and interact with others without fear of surveillance or exploitation. The launch of TrueNet sent shockwaves through the tech world. It was a direct challenge to the very systems that had allowed the tech giants to thrive. For the first time, there was a viable alternative to the centralized platforms that had dominated the digital landscape for years. Elon knew that TrueNet wasn't just a product, it was a symbol. A symbol of resistance, of empowerment, and of a future where privacy was no longer a commodity, but a fundamental right. The battle was far from over. The tech giants would continue to fight back, the media would continue to spread misinformation, and the challenges would keep coming. But Elon had planted a seed, and with TrueNet, he had created a blueprint for the future. And as he stood before the world, watching the first wave of users sign up for TrueNet, he knew that this was just the beginning. The fight for privacy, for freedom, and for a better future was only beginning to unfold. Elon sat quietly in his office, watching the live feeds of TrueNet's launch unfold across the globe. The platform was gaining users by the second, with every new account a testament to the world's growing desire for privacy and transparency. He had spent months working with engineers and activists to bring this vision to life, and now, it was happening. The revolution was digital, and it was happening right now. Yet, despite the overwhelming success of TrueNet, Elon knew the real battle wasn't over. The tech giants had taken a significant blow, but they weren't going to give up their stranglehold on the digital world so easily. There would be more lawsuits, more attacks, more attempts to discredit him and his work. But what had started as a simple idea, to expose the truth about data privacy, had blossomed into something much larger. A few days after TrueNet's launch, Elon received an unexpected message. It was from a group of international tech leaders who had long been part of the establishment. They had watched from the sidelines as his movement grew and shifted public opinion. Now, they were ready to join forces. They understood that the current system was unsustainable, and they saw in Elon's vision a chance to transform the future of technology for good. Elon, the message began, you've started a movement that is bigger than any of us. We want to be a part of this. Together, we can build the future of technology on our terms, not on the terms of those who seek to control and exploit it. Elon was taken aback. He had never expected this kind of alliance. The tech giants, those same corporations who had once viewed him as a disruptive threat, were now turning to him for collaboration. The future he had envisioned was no longer a distant dream. It was becoming reality. He responded to the message immediately. This is just the beginning. Let's make sure we build a future where technology empowers the people, not the corporations. Together, we can make this world better. TrueNet quickly gained traction in global markets. Governments were forced to take notice as the platform became a powerful alternative to the status quo. The push for greater transparency in data protection was gaining momentum, and as more and more people made the switch to TrueNet, the traditional tech giants began to feel the pressure. But the battle was far from over. Elon knew that even with all the momentum, there would be challenges ahead. His public image, while largely positive now, would be scrutinized, twisted, and attacked. The tech giants had deep pockets, and they wouldn't give up their control without a fight. As the legal and PR battles raged on, Elon doubled down on his focus, creating a more equitable, privacy-centered future. He launched new initiatives designed to democratize technology, tools that gave people more control over their lives, from blockchain-driven financial systems to open-source communication platforms. He was shifting the very fabric of how technology was used in society, and the world was taking notice. The final blow to the old system came when the tech consortium tried one last desperate attempt to discredit Elon and TrueNet. They orchestrated a smear campaign aimed at turning the public against him, accusing him of using the platform to collect data under the guise of privacy. But Elon, ever the strategist, had anticipated this move. His team had been transparent from the start about how TrueNet operated, and they had taken measures to protect the integrity of the platform. In a public address, Elon responded directly to the accusations. TrueNet was built for one purpose: to give the people control. We are transparent about our operations, our data policies, and our vision. If anyone is truly concerned about privacy, they should look at their own systems. The very companies accusing us of foul play are the ones who have been selling your data for years. It's time for a change. The message resonated, and the smear campaign backfired. Instead of weakening his movement, it strengthened it. People rallied behind Elon and TrueNet, fully aware of the stakes involved. Privacy, once seen as a luxury, was now recognized as a fundamental right. With each passing day, the world shifted. The tech giants began to lose their influence, and more companies and individuals embraced the decentralized future that Elon had championed. TrueNet's user base exploded, growing beyond Elon's wildest expectations. What had started as a way to expose the truth about the tech giants had evolved into a new digital ecosystem, where users could exist without fear of surveillance or exploitation. Elon's mission, while not completely fulfilled, had already changed the world in ways he had never imagined. He had created a movement that was no longer about one man or one company, it was about a collective vision for the future. The next steps would be about scaling this new reality, about making sure that privacy, transparency, and freedom were built into the very DNA of the digital world. In a quiet moment, as Elon reflected on everything that had transpired, he thought back to the early days of his journey, the nights spent working relentlessly on Tesla, SpaceX, and now TrueNet. His life had never been easy, but he had always believed in pushing boundaries, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. He had faced enormous challenges, personal, professional, and legal, but with each step, he had come closer to the future he envisioned. A future where technology served humanity, not the other way around. In the months that followed, Elon continued to push forward, building partnerships, scaling TrueNet, and ensuring that the principles of privacy, transparency, and security remained at the heart of every new project. His work was far from finished, but the victories he had achieved laid the foundation for a future that would be shaped by the very ideals he had fought for. And as the sun set on a new era, Elon Musk knew one thing for certain: the digital world was no longer in the hands of the few. It belonged to the many. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?